Most people think the mob made money through violence, shootouts, robberies, dramatic crimes. But that was never the real business. Violence was only the warning. The real money came from systems. Quiet systems that produced cash every single week. Organized crime learned early that steady money beats fast money. Instead of chasing big scores, they built rackets that could pull money from the same neighborhoods again and again without ever stopping. A robbery pays once. A racket pays forever. That became the basic business model of organized crime. Instead of risking everything for one big score, crews focused on operations that generated steady income. Illegal gambling rooms, sports betting, numbers lotteries, loan sharking, and protection payments. Each one produced small amounts of money from many different people. But when those streams combined, the total became enormous. The structure made the system work. At the street level were soldiers collecting cash from gamblers, borrowers, and businesses. Above them were capos running entire crews and keeping the money moving. At the top were bosses who rarely touched the street at all. Every week, envelopes moved upward through the chain. Each level kept a percentage and passed the rest higher, turning street crime into a reliable revenue pipeline. But the real power wasn't just illegal activity, it was control. Control of unions, trucking routes, construction sites, garbage hauling, and shipping docks. When organized crime controlled the system around an industry, they didn't have to steal money. The money arrived automatically. Businesses paid to avoid problems, workers paid to keep jobs, and contracts went only to the companies approved by the family. Once these rackets were in place, the money never really stopped. Every week the same businesses paid, the same gamblers played, and the same borrowers owed interest. It wasn't chaos. It was routine. A quiet economic system running underneath the legitimate one. To understand how organized crime really worked, you have to understand the rackets that kept that money flowing. The foundation of mob income started with street rackets. These were operations that didn't require huge infrastructure, just control and reputation. Gambling was the biggest. Card rooms, sports betting, and the illegal numbers lottery spread through neighborhoods for decades. Thousands of small bets were placed every day, and the house always kept a percentage. It wasn't one big win that mattered. It was volume. Loan sharking was another major street racket. The mob offered quick cash to people who could not get money from banks. But the interest was brutal. Weekly payments piled up fast, and if a borrower fell behind, the pressure began. Threats, intimidation, sometimes violence. The goal was not just repayment. It was control, keeping the borrower trapped in a cycle that produced steady income for the crew. Protection rackets worked the same way. Businesses were told they could operate safely if they paid a small weekly fee. The pitch sounded simple. Pay and nothing bad happens. Refuse, and suddenly windows break, deliveries disappear, or inspectors start showing up. Most owners paid because the cost of resistance was always higher than the price of cooperation. Quiet payments kept the system running. Another reliable racket was the numbers game, an underground lottery that operated in working-class neighborhoods for decades. Players picked a set of numbers and placed small bets with local runners. At the end of the day, the winning numbers were tied to public figures like stock market totals. Thousands of people played daily. Each bet was small, but together they produced enormous cash flowing back to the crews running the operation. Bookmaking turned sports into another steady stream of income. Football games, boxing matches, horse races, anything people wanted to bet on could become part of the operation. Local bookmakers took bets from hundreds of customers, recording wagers and paying winners while always keeping a percentage of the action. The real advantage was volume. When enough bets move through the system, the house wins over time. Nightclubs and bars often became quiet partners in the system. Mob crews would supply liquor, provide security, or help a struggling owner avoid problems with inspectors. In return, the business kicked up a portion of its profits every week. Sometimes the ownership was hidden through front men. Sometimes it was just pressure. Either way, nightlife became another dependable stream feeding money into the organization. Debt collection became its own business inside the racket system. When gamblers or borrowers could not pay what they owed, crews stepped in to collect. The reputation alone often did the work. People knew ignoring the debt could lead to broken property, lost jobs, or worse. Because of that reputation, most payments eventually arrived. Fear was not the business itself, but it made the business function. Some rackets targeted everyday goods. Cigarettes, alcohol, and other taxed products could be bought cheaply through stolen shipments or illegal distribution networks. The crews then sold them through small stores or street vendors at lower prices than legitimate businesses. Customers saved a little money, the sellers moved a lot of product, and the mob collected profit without paying the taxes that made the goods expensive in the first place. Street vendors, small markets, and neighborhood shops were also drawn into the system. Sometimes the mob supplied products, sometimes they controlled delivery routes, and sometimes they simply demanded a weekly payment to operate without problems. For many small business owners, refusing meant constant trouble. Paying meant stability. Over time, those quiet payments became another reliable income stream, feeding money into the crews. None of these rackets were glamorous on their own. A few bets here, a loan payment there, a small envelope from a business owner. But when dozens of operations ran at the same time across an entire city, the totals became massive. Street rackets created the foundation of mob wealth. Small streams of money, flowing constantly, building the financial base that powered the entire organization. Street rackets created the foundation, but the real money came when organized crime moved into legitimate industries. Instead of targeting individuals, they began influencing entire systems. Construction, trucking, garbage hauling, shipping docks, and labor unions became the next step. When a family gained influence over these industries, they were no longer collecting small envelopes. They were controlling millions of dollars in contracts. Labor unions became one of the most powerful tools in that system. When organized crime controlled a union leadership position, they could influence who got hired, who kept their job, and which companies were allowed to operate. Businesses that cooperated faced fewer problems. Businesses that resisted suddenly found their workers striking, their projects delayed, or their equipment sitting idle. Control of labor meant control of the entire job site. Construction projects were especially valuable because they involved huge budgets and tight schedules. A single delay could cost a developer enormous amounts of money. That pressure created opportunity. Mob-connected crews could offer labor peace, protection from union disputes, and reliable delivery schedules. In return, contractors inflated bids, shared profits, or paid kickbacks that quietly flowed back to the families controlling the system. Garbage hauling became another lucrative industry. In many cities, mob-connected companies divided neighborhoods into controlled routes. Once a company controlled our route, businesses had little choice about who picked up their waste. Prices could be quietly raised, competitors pushed out, and contracts locked in for years. It looked like a normal sanitation service on the surface, but behind it was a tightly controlled network. Trucking and shipping were just as valuable. Goods moving through ports and warehouses passed through companies that controlled transportation routes. When mob influence reached those unions or companies, they could slow deliveries, redirect shipments, or pressure businesses into cooperation. Paying a fee meant your cargo moved smoothly. Refusing meant delays that could cost a company far more than the payment. Ports and shipping docks offered another layer of opportunity. Whoever controlled labor on the waterfront could influence which cargo moved first, which shipments were delayed, and which containers were quietly diverted. That power created chances for theft, smuggling, and protection payments. Businesses often preferred cooperation because a delayed shipment could cost thousands in lost contracts and penalties. Bid rigging became common once organized crime had influence over contractors and unions at the same time. Competing companies would secretly agree on who would win a contract before the bidding even started. The chosen company submitted the lowest bid. The others submitted higher ones, and everyone involved received a share of the profit. To outsiders, it looked like normal competition. In reality, the winner had already been decided. Front companies helped hide the money. Restaurants, trucking firms, waste companies, and construction businesses could operate legally while quietly feeding profits to mob leadership. On paper, everything looked legitimate. Employees, invoices, tax records. But behind the scenes, those businesses also served as places to move cash, hide ownership, and funnel money from illegal rackets into the legal economy. Once control reached this level, the organization no longer depended only on street crime. Entire industries could be influenced from behind the scenes. Contractors adjusted bids, union leaders managed labor pressure, and front companies moved money through the system. It became a network where legitimate business and organized crime overlapped, each one quietly supporting the other. By the time organized crime reached this stage, the business model had changed completely. Street rackets were still important, but the real wealth came from controlling systems larger than any single crew. Contracts, transportation, labor and waste services generated far more money than gambling tables ever could. The mob was no longer just running rackets. It was influencing entire sectors of the economy. All that money had to move somewhere. Every racket, every contract, every business connection produced cash that traveled upward through the organization. Soldiers collected it first. They handled the street operations, gambling rooms, loan payments, protection money. At the end of the week, those earnings were bundled into envelopes and delivered to their captain, who oversaw the entire crew. The captain didn't keep everything. He took a percentage for running the crew, then passed the rest higher. This process was known as kicking up. Every level of the organization contributed upward. Soldiers paid captains, captains paid the administration, and the administration ultimately answered to the boss. It was less like a gang and more like a structured business hierarchy. Because of that structure, everyone had an incentive to earn. A soldier who brought in large amounts of money gained respect and protection inside the family. A captain with strong earners under him became more powerful within the organization. The boss, in turn, benefited from the success of every crew beneath him. The more money flowing upward, the stronger the entire family became. Cash was the preferred form of payment because it left fewer records. Envelopes could move quietly through restaurants, social clubs, or construction offices without attracting attention. Once collected, the money could be used for several purposes. Some funded daily operations, some paid legal expenses, and some was reinvested into new rackets or businesses that expanded the organization's reach. The structure also created discipline. If a soldier held back money or failed to pass the proper share upward, it became a serious problem. Loyalty in organized crime was measured partly by earnings. A crew member who consistently produced income was valuable. Someone who disrupted the money flow threatened the stability of the entire operation, and that rarely ended well. As the money moved upward, leadership could stay removed from the street. Bosses rarely ran gambling rooms or collected debts themselves. Their job was oversight. They settled disputes between crews, approved major operations, and protected the organization from internal conflict. Distance from the street also helped protect them legally, keeping direct evidence further away from the top. Some of the money also went toward influence. Lawyers, political connections, and favors helped keep investigations quiet or delayed. In some cases, officials were bribed. In others, businesses connected to powerful people received quiet benefits. The goal was never open control. The goal was protection, making sure the system could continue operating without constant interference. Money also funded expansion. Successful crews invested in new rackets, new businesses, and new territories. A profitable gambling operation might lead to a loan shark network. Control of a trucking company might open access to shipping docks. Each success created another opportunity to grow the system, pulling more money into the pipeline that fed the organization. Over time, the system became self-sustaining. Street rackets generated cash. Legitimate businesses helped move and hide it, and the hierarchy ensured everyone received a share. As long as the money kept flowing upward and the rules were followed, the structure held together. That flow of money was the real lifeblood of organized crime. Without it, The entire system collapsed. That's why the mob focused so heavily on earning. Violence made headlines, but money kept the organization alive. Every racket, every business connection, every envelope delivered up the chain reinforced the structure. The mob wasn't built around chaos. It was built around revenue. Steady, predictable income that could support an entire criminal hierarchy for decades. If this breakdown made the system clearer, the full expansion is linked in the description. Organized crime wasn't just about crime. It was about structure, incentives, and control. Understanding how the money moved explains how the entire organization survived for so long.